Gio and I are thrilled to be joined by Mike Fransen today. Mike and I were just trying to figure out how long it's been since we have talked. It's been a while because I think his sheepadoodle was new the last time we talked, and his sheepadoodle just celebrated a third birthday. So Mike is the founder and CEO of Workng. We'll let him get into what he's up to. He was the former chief operating officer for Parkway Realty Management, and before that, a captain in the U.S. Army. And Mike looks really good on paper. He has an MBA from Yale as well. And he is now a published author. We're going to talk about the book that he wrote in a little bit. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what Mike sees happening in the world of commercial real estate and flex. So Mike, thanks for joining us today. We're looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, so am I. You guys are two of my flex kindred spirits. So this is awesome.
And so I'll start with saying Mike looks good in person too, not just paper. So I got your back.
I know. Well, I was looking at his LinkedIn. I was like, damn, he looks good on paper.
Oh, man.
Totally.
That must be a tough question coming.
Gio, do you want to hit him with some, what is he working on lately? I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think the most interesting part about Mike and what the last really 10 years have held from. So I met him, man, going on 8 years ago now, Mike? And
well, at least,
I was with Regis at the time, and I happened to be in Houston. I reached out to him and he said, I've got about 15 or 30 minutes in between meetings. Can we meet at your hotel? And an hour and a half later, he realized that I kind of had an idea somewhat of what I was talking about and vice versa. So Mike is, in my opinion, one of the first landlords that really got the evolution of not just flex, but how to overall do the programming within an office building, an office complex. So Mike, you want to bring us in kind of the early days of, let's talk about really how your office career started and really what your evolution was to get to Parkway. And then, I mean, you did a couple of the first flex deals in Austin and Houston. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, no, I think that those were, I was tried and true asset manager. So whatever you think about office REIT, originally Parkway was based out of Jackson, Mississippi, suburban office originally. And I honestly, the first, I would say 4 years, just learning the craft. Like you guys alluded to, had come out of the Army, gone to business school. And, my first assignment, I was warned and they made good on their promise. They said, Mike, we're going to just throw you on this 123,000 foot asset in Stafford, Texas. In case you're wondering, it's somewhere between Houston and Sugar Land. And it's got one side shaped like a sawtooth, which if you're also wondering, that's not an architect's dream for planning purposes. But, it was a great learning place for me to start because the way Parkway operated at the time, we both leased and managed, which as you guys both know is very unconventional. Probably not ultimately, those are two very different skill sets, two different kinds of people. But for me, it was perfect because as a future asset manager, I needed to know both of those skills. I needed to know everything from a tour to, hey, if I say this on a tour and I have to live through construction and they have to move in, I better get my story right. And I better, really know this business. I better be able to explain operating expenses. I better be able to figure out and have a capital conversation about a roof. We had old windows that leaked, and how do you deal with that? And in Houston, it tends to rain, and it likes to rain sideways. And again, if you're wondering, that's not good for windows. And that was 4 or 5 years bouncing around, and then took on asset management. Did live through a hurricane as a new asset manager. We had 3 roofs blow off. And putting buildings back together with insurance and all that stuff, that's about as unfun as office can get. But it's about as mission critical as office can get. And how do you keep tenants in a moment like that? And how do you make good on the commitments you made? And how do you make sure they make good on the commitments they make? And so that is, reference, that was my life until we bought a company out of LA. A lot of people know Thomas Properties. They were involved in some of the EOP days. Blackstone bought those, sold off the pieces. Thomas bought some of those, 07. So obviously, honestly, probably peak of the market for Austin. and some other places. We inherited, or as an operator, I inherited the Austin and the Houston portfolio in 2014. And in 2014, Austin is not what it is today, which is just hard to fathom. I'm a guy whose head is on the chopping block. I didn't ask for these 5 downtown assets, but I'm loving it. I loved Austin like everybody. My wife and I met there. So I begged and pleaded, and they really want to put someone different there. I said, please don't. I will drive here every week. I will make it seem like I live here. And that's what I did for 3 years. I just dove in, stayed at the Four Seasons right next to the building we owned, and just got after it. And in 14, as I'm scrambling, trying to get my arms around these older assets, we did have Frost Bank, which is, up until recently, the iconic one. There's now lots of iconic ones. But we had a lot of older buildings, and we had 5 downtown, and we had floors that had been empty forever. We had law firms that had moved out. We had tech. Nobody knew it was going to happen. And we had inherited a partnership there, and so getting on the partnership, trying to devise a strategy. And remember talking to our CEO at the time, and we said, man, it'd be great if we could break up a floor. I was getting to know Capital Factory, which, Austin and all is a pretty infamous incubator, probably one of the first of its kind, and kind of drew from my alumni roots. Got to know some Air Force Academy guys who were startups, and was just learning. I was like, so where do you guys go? What do you guys do? What happens here? You get funded. I don't usually see groups like yours and buildings like ours. How does this happen? Feels like there's a gap here. And I remember asking the one guy, I said, so where do you go from here once you get funded? And he goes, oh, we're going to apartments. And I go, is that even legal? He goes, I don't know, but that's the only thing available. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense. I don't want you. And he said, we're not ready. And he called it at the time. He said, Mike, we're not ready for one of your big boy leases. And I said, honestly, I don't know that I can handle it anyway with REITs and all the rules. I think we're both probably in a jam, and you don't need it for as long as I need you to have it. And so we had this old club floor at 600 Congress that had been 12th floor, and it had been nothing forever. And it was just a terrible layout, everything, again, architect nightmare. And I told our CEO, I said, holy smokes, what if we broke this floor up into pieces? It's different, than Regis. I think it's more active, it's more dynamic, it's a little more interesting. And we go, yeah, that sounds amazing. We couldn't do that. But one of our partners, he said, Mike, I used to be in New York, and there's this new thing called Coworking, this new group called WeWork. And I said, that sounds impossible. Let's do it. And it's just comical to think back, trying to sell a REIT on WeWork in 14 in Texas, which did not exist. There was trying to sell WeWork on Texas. I mean, I can't tell you how great. We were driving those guys in golf carts around downtown for days. And I remember having this conversation going, guys, because at the time they were on the coast, right? I mean, that's how they really started. They went coast, middle, and then after we did the WeWork deal, I would get all these calls from Phoenix and Atlanta because that was the next place they go. So, I would get asset manager calls from those markets, but learned a ton, as you can imagine. Those guys probably should have gotten kicked out of Austin. I remember they had the space, as has got so many unusual characteristics just from a structural standpoint. They blow more air than anybody else because they need more air. And I remember they got jammed up with the city, and they wrote an open letter. And I remember getting a call and looking at the letter going, oh, we're in trouble. This is over. I know Austin, it's taken me a year to, touch all the babies and do all the magical things in Austin just to get in their good graces. This is not a good start. And we got through it, but we got through that buildup. And I remember calling Jason, the COO again at the time, and I said, I know 2 things out of this. 1, I never want to do a deal with WeWork again. But 2, they have blown open the back door of our industry, and this is a game changer. Like, this is going to forever change the way we do it. I always tell people that, I want to trash on them. I always say, look, it took somebody like them with that personality with our industry of office. Yep. They may have been MySpace and not Facebook, but they opened the door for so many that came in behind them. And And that was kind of the two things I learned was this is real. We need to figure out how to encapsulate and incorporate this into asset management. And that, you asked what, that's part of the story of Workng is, and I still think even to this day, we are struggling to figure out how to take that old tried and true necessary asset management, if you're going to have big assets with big things that break and big things that need to be run, in a more futuristic, I hate to say that word because it's really today, it's not even futuristic,